What's good, folks? Welcome to another episode of the Cover One Film Room. I am one of your two hosts on this evening, Anthony Prohaska, joined tonight by Erik Turner. Erik, we are into the second part of this series where we are setting the table and tone for the offseason for the Buffalo Bills. Last week, we took a look at the defense from a schematic and an X's and O's perspective. And this week, we're going to do the same, whether it be Ken Dorsey, whether it be Josh Allen, whether it be the weaponry, the offensive line, anything and everything to do from a roster perspective and an X's and O's perspective. Again, with the idea of reviewing who this Bills team was in order to set the table of who they can be and, more importantly, need to be going forward in order to potentially finally get over that hump and achieve championship hardware and trophies that they are trying to achieve as a team and as an organization. So that's on the docket for tonight. But before we get into that, Erik, how you doing? How you feeling? How's life?
Good, man. You know, the football season is officially over for everybody. Chiefs, obviously had a big win the other night.
Hooray.
And I know it's difficult, and this episode is going to be very difficult. I know for a lot of fans that tune in. I know that the opinions on this offense and Ken Dorsey and things that happened this year,
everybody loves
are very strong. Yeah, very strong. So I know it's going to be one of those shows that there's going to be some negativity. So keep it all right, and don't take it out on fellow community members here. But no, the Super Bowl, I want to talk about the Super Bowl because I feel like a lot of what happened in that game is kind of what we're going to be talking about tonight. And when we watch games like that, we're always comparing, right? And like, even just the average fan, we're always comparing, like, see, why doesn't our team do that? It's always that line. And I feel like this year, maybe more than others, especially with how things kind of ended for the Bills, but also, again, what happened on the offensive side of the ball. And I think that really starts with something we're going to be talking about a lot this offseason. That's the offensive line. That's the trenches offense and defensive line, for that matter. I think the Bills had struggles in that area. We're going to talk about those struggles tonight on the offensive side, but we talked about it last week when we did the film room on the defensive side, how the interior and edge pressure didn't step up when they needed to in the playoffs as well. So I feel like the job that the Chiefs did versus that vaunted defense of the Eagles is really talking point number one, man. That the offensive line, especially those interior offensive line players, did such a good job at keeping the pressure off of Mahomes, not allowing them to push the pocket into his face. Obviously, he was a little hobbled as well. So trying to get him off the spot was important. And they did a few times, but he was still able to maneuver and manipulate the pocket and make plays with his legs and his arms. And just, it was just a fun game to watch, especially from a scheme perspective, something that we love because we break down so much of it. How they were able to get the ball out so quickly, how they leaned on the run game at times, but how also they schemed and used sequencing, which is something we're going to talk about tonight, to really build upon things they had on film and get wide open wide receivers for layups. I mean, I think that's one of the major talking points as well.
There was, so many, and you hit on a bunch of them, coming into this game. The tackle spots were the weaknesses on the offensive line for the Chiefs. Andrew Wiley and Orlando Brown were up and down in their performance, but it was always that interior, the Joe Tooney to Creed Humphrey to Trey Smith, who were solid. You got two all-pros in that interior, and they anchor things a lot for them this year. And those three played great, but Wiley and Brown played good as well. However much credit you want to give to Slippery Field for not allowing Reddick and Sweat and those dudes to get upfield. I know a lot of people are talking about that. But they were solid in their pass protection, like you mentioned. But the bigger piece for me out of the line and the offense from a non-sequencing perspective, which is the biggest point, but I know we're going to talk about that. You mentioned it, the run game piece. At the end of the first half, Mahomes gets tackled and he hurts that ankle. And they come out in the second half and it's just like, you know what? Let's try and give him a rest a little bit and let's just run it down the Eagles' throat. And it was, credit to Pacheco and credit to Jerick McKinnon. Also, to some of the play design for the Chiefs, going with a little more pony personnel and putting Jerick McKinnon in at the fullback spot and creating some looks and advantageous situations for them. But that offensive line was just reestablishing the line of scrimmage on it, what seemed like every rep. And they had a diverse run game. You saw a lot of different modes of attack, but regardless of what they were doing, you saw physicality, you saw displacement, you saw just ownership of the trenches consistently from the Chiefs offensive line. And coming into that game, I think everybody thought, whether in the run or the pass, the Eagles defensive line had the advantage. And not only did they not in this game, but the Chiefs were able to really hang their hat on that O-line in the run game to kind of alleviate things from Mahomes and continue to kind of not let him coast, but allow him to easily operate when you could tell that he was in pain and banged up.
Yeah, and that offensive line and their ability to protect Mahomes, even though he was banged up, it's something we're thinking about with Josh Allen and the Bills. The Bills need to
Yep.
invest the proper assets at the offensive line positions inside and off the right side. We're going to talk about tonight, but it's one of those things like, okay, if they secure the offensive line, I'm going to ask the fans: do you guys believe that the Bills have a scheme in place that can beat teams like that, that can beat teams like the Eagles, the Chiefs? I still don't know. I feel like Ken Dorsey did some really good things, right? He did some really good things this year, and he was our biggest question going into the season. And when we did, the offseason stuff, it was, okay, what's Ken Dorsey bringing?
We talked about it so much.
And I will say, all things considered, I thought in his first year, he did some really good things. He had your typical ups and downs. This year, maybe more than we've ever seen, not just on the field, but off the field, some of those obstacles to overcome. The arm injury with, Josh Allen. But I thought overall he did pretty well. I mean, 28.4 points per game. That's number 2 behind Kansas City. Number 1 in third down conversion rate at 50.265%. Like, you're going to win a lot of games if you're converting third downs at that rate. And, they're able to do that because they were so efficient on first and second down. By the time they got the third down, it was on average 3rd and 6.4 yards. So that was the 7th best. So there were a lot of good things, especially setting Josh Allen up on those critical downs and those, high leverage moments, as you always say. And I just think at certain times in the game, or in certain times of the field, red zone per se, there were just times where Josh wasn't comfortable, whether it was because of the offensive line or because he hit a roadblock or a dead end when it came to their passing game.
Yeah, there was, when we were just talking about it offline, the amount of variables that exist on any given play in order for a team to succeed offensively or defensively is immense. There's so much that goes into it. And when you look at the Bills offense, the struggles that we saw from the Bills offense came from a multitude of places, and it came from a multitude of places consistently. Yeah. Some of it was Ken Dorsey from a schematic perspective and a sequencing and play calling perspective. Some of it was Josh Allen decision-making. Some of it was poor protection from the offensive line. Some of it was poor execution from the weapons. And it just seemed like everybody rotated who was going to be the problem on any given play. One play, it was the design. The next play, it was a poor decision from Josh Allen. The next play, it was a blown block up front. The next play, it was a drop. And there's more examples with that, but I think that all contributed to being why everything felt so difficult and hard for this offense at times. And I know everybody wants to, and I don't mean this to take the easy way out, but I think people want the easiest answer. And so they try to funnel their anger into one area or one person. And it's rotated a bit. At times it was Ken Dorsey. Now it seems to be Gabe Davis recently. And now it's more, or even more now, the offensive line. But football has so many variables. There's so much gray to it. And the true answer, which makes this more of a complicated problem that we're going to dive into tonight, the true answer is that it was a little bit of everyone in a bunch of different ways. And that all, when added together, contributed to the dysfunction and malfunctions that we saw up front.
Yeah, so that's where I want to start. I want to start with the offensive coordinator, obviously, the game planning. I thought overall his opening game scripts, the 15 to 20 plays of the game, I thought they were very good. And some of that is reflected in DVOA here by quarters and halves. If you look at the first quarter, they're 4th in DVOA, second quarter second, third quarter first, and then fourth quarter and late they're 19th. And then you look, first half to second half. So you can see they start off in that early in the game quite well. As far as changes that happened, I mean, that was hit or miss. But I think overall, all things considered, for a first-time play caller, a lot of his scripts were really good, especially if we're talking, I don't know, first 6 or 7 weeks of the year when you really are rolling out that new offense that no one's really seen. I think that he did a really good job if we're talking DVOA and opening scripts.
Yeah, he had a good design perspective in terms of, wow, it's a crazy bike outside. In
Wow.
terms of, right? I was like,
Hold on, we're in February, right?
I was gonna ignore it, and I was like, no, everybody heard that. I'll
No, we
acknowledge
heard
it.
that.
Yeah. I tried to talk over it, but I was like, it ain't gonna work. Yeah, he had that ability to kind of test the cage a little bit and poke and prod and have that success early. And that really continued through the second quarter and the third quarter, like you see. And, I know everybody's going to see that fourth quarter number and see the 19, but also look at that, first in terms of late and
Late and
close. Like,
close.
so
Yeah.
when those high leverage situations, again, like the Bills offense consistently from an efficiency standpoint was there. I also feel like the people that are still super mad at Ken Dorsey are just going to look at this and be like, well, DVOA sucks.
Yep.
And that's late and close. You highlighted it right up there. Those are all plays in the second half or overtime with the score within 8 points. So it wasn't like, oh, well, they were probably so good, late because they were front runner or they were up on all these teams. Like, no, when it was close, they were there as well. And you add in even a couple other metrics, from SIS, they finished second in the year in positive play percentage passing. They finished third on the year in positive play percentage from a rushing standpoint. If you remove Josh Allen from the equation, they were still 10th in positive play percentage from a rushing standpoint. So overall, they were largely successful when it came to the offensive side of the ball. It was just inconsistencies and disconnects, and again, in a multitude of areas at seemingly the wrong time. And, much like last year, the way the Bills lost to the Chiefs, the last game of the year really defined your season, especially for your fan base. And everybody thought the offense was riding high and invincible. And now you come out of this game against the Bengals, and it's like, well, the offense sucks and everything's terrible and everybody's got to go. But and I hate to use wins and losses as a record or as a metric, but you don't win 13 games by being like a bad football team. Like, that just doesn't happen. You don't finish at the top of all these advanced metrics in a multitude of areas if you're a bad offense or if you're a bad football team. Yes, now that does not mean everything's perfect and everything's great and nothing needs to be improved upon from a roster or from a Dorsey perspective, but there are some positives to hang your hat on if you are a Bills fan for this offense. It was just, again, an unfortunate way the season ended, and all of those kind of warts showing up all at one time in one game.
Yeah, and if we're talking strengths that we saw this year from the offense, some of the positives, I know a lot of this, as Ant said, a lot of fans are probably like, you know what, I don't want to hear it. But there
That's
were
exactly right.
positives, guys. Like, there were positives. And I think we're in agreement when we talk about the run game. I think it came along as the season went on, especially once Josh's elbow was injured. And they had to lean on that in that mid to, third quarter of the season. We were looking at some of the Football Outsiders, DVOA stats and whatnot. And you can see when it came to power rank, which is, I believe, third and fourth and 1 to 2 yards, they were ranked fourth. Stuffed rank, they were 16th. But second level rank, they were 7th. And that's between 5 and 10 yards. So the offensive line blocking to get the running back 5 to 10 yards, they were 7th. And then open field rank is 10 yards plus. They were ranked third, which is something that the Bills have been decent at. They've gotten Singletary in years past on some of those explosive runs on those pin and pulls. But this year, adding James Cook on top of Singletary, maintaining that ability to get, 13 to 15 rushes of 10 or 15 yards or more. Both of them combined together in explosive runs. I think they bested Nick Chubb by like 1. So them combined actually, they really brought some explosiveness to the run game. And I think it just got better as the year went on. If we're looking at some of the yards per attempt for running backs only, according to SIS, the Bills the running backs averaged 4.9 yards per attempt this year. That was 8th overall. If you look at 2021, they were 4.3 yards per attempt. That was 15th. And then the year before that, 2020, they were 4.5, which was ranked 12th. So I thought their run game got going. We're going to talk about some of those plays tonight, Ant. I liked how they tied it in together. They had different concepts that all looked the same, especially if you're looking at the running back's footwork. And then they tied it to the passing game with some of that RPO stuff.
Yeah, their ability to, much like we saw at the end of the 2021 season, the Bills started to find an identity in their run game the more the season went on. But this year in 2022, they found it earlier. They found it closer to the midpoint in the season and then going forward. And it was in a variety of ways. 2021 saw more gap scheme success. towards the end of this year and from the middle on, we saw success in zone. We saw success in gap. We're again, like you mentioned, we're going to take a look at some specific plays and concepts that they were able to lean their run game into. We saw good execution and we saw the success come from it. And even just looking from a running back perspective, there's about 60 running backs that had at least 20% of carries this past season. James Cook was tied for second in yards per attempt at 5.7. Devin Singletary was tied for 24th at 4.6. They had success, again, just from that one perspective, but everything else we're going to show you folks. I thought Dorsey and Aaron Kromer really found the types of run packages that suited each running back and then use them successfully, but didn't use them in the most predictive ways. And we saw them, I'll think back to the Miami game, the second one, the Saturday night game, when they just ran dart and tackle wrap 3 plays in a row from side to side. Yep. And ran it right down their throat and took advantage. Like they pinpointed that, they identified it, and they spammed the hell out of it, and it worked. And we saw that a lot throughout the back end of the year. And I think that was one really nice piece from Dorsey and this offense. You know, however much somebody wants to give Kromer that success versus Dorsey or whatever have you, but either way, it was a successful part of this offense, and it was needed again as they tried to mitigate some of the impact of Josh Allen's injury and help him forward.
Yeah, look at these 10+ yard runs by Singletary, 22, James Cook, 14, 15+ yards, 13 for Singletary, 11 for James Cook. Again, we're going to break down some of those plays, but I just thought they did a really good job of coming along in that department. Now, the issue with the run game wasn't that they couldn't run. It's just they stopped running at times.
That was, and I was going to say, like, and then like, that's how the pendulum swings. Cause you're like, oh, they did a good job with the run. But then like, you know, in our notes, like one of the pieces is like, all things we liked from Dorsey, things we didn't. Mm-hmm. And in things I liked, I have the run game. And then the things I didn't like was not running the ball enough. Like it worked. And then it just felt like, especially times where it felt like everybody, even the people who didn't want the Bills to run, even when they were like, the Bills need to run the ball, and you just felt like they needed to or they should, they still wouldn't. Yeah, they got away from it when I thought it could have helped them even more, whether it was from a need standpoint or just from a sequencing standpoint or from what the defense was giving you. It would have been nice to see it used more consistently, and especially, you know, this year, but also going forward, where the run game is kind of becoming in vogue again in the NFL based on how defenses have started to play. So that run game is going to be important. We'll see, you know, what they do this next year.
Yeah. So let's take a look at some of these plays. You guys are probably asking yourself, what do you mean by the concepts looked similar? So for a defense, especially like linebackers, 54 and 58 here, they're keying not just the offensive linemen, especially these 3 inside here, but they're keying the running back's footwork too. And you're going to see the footwork. I want you to watch. This is that tackle wrap play where you're going to have the running back same side it here, and then you're getting that tackle pulling off the right side there in Deion Dawkins. Watch the footwork, and then just watch how they key. The linebackers are keying the offensive line here. You see Dawkins go ahead and log and seal that edge player inside, and then Singletary. Watch how he sets up this block and gets north and south there for an explosive run. It was one of their better run concepts that we've cataloged all year. Again, tackle wrap, we call it dart. This was from the same side, but it's interesting because this is not something that a lot of NFL teams have run. This was a trendy type play, and we even saw it in the Super Bowl a little bit because more times than not, you know, these gap runs, these runs with pullers, these are the pullers, usually the guards. So linebackers aren't used to keying in on tackles to pull, but the Bills ran it a ton this year, and they ran it very successfully from their spread looks.
And it's a good way to take advantage of the skill sets of your guys up front. Like, you know, no disrespect to anyone on that line, but if, you know, you're looking for somebody to pull from that left side, would you rather have it be Deion Dawkins or would you rather have it be Roger Saffold? Like,
yeah, right.
You'd rather have it be Deion Dawkins. And then, you know, from the other side, when they're running that tackle wrap from a Spencer Brown perspective, you know, play to his athleticism, play to that speed and his ability to, you know, be a movement guy. We talked about it so much with Mitch Morse and Ryan Bates and what they did last year with pin and pull. But, you know, what they did this year with those, with dart and those tackle wrap plays, again, it played to the strengths and the skill set of what they had up front and allowed them to find success. And Singletary was so good at running it over and over again and pacing it and finding the hole.
Yeah, here's another one. And so this one's tied to their RPO game, right? This is a bubble screen to the top of the screen, and then they're just running a go ball with Gabriel Davis to the bottom. But this time it's Spencer Brown pulling right to left. Same side, footwork by Devin Singletary. I'll explain why that's important. You see the insert block from Spencer Brown, and this is Devin Singletary's touchdown against the Chicago Bears. We'll look at it from the end zone angle. Again, this is just awesome because they're sending a blitz from the field off the right side there. And just watch the linebacker right here. Watch it, how he reacts to this movement up front, but also the running back. You see Singletary, again, pushing this way and then kind of bending it back. That's important when we talk about the next concept, but watch Spencer Brown insert, take care of that guy, and then just everyone's walled off, and then Singletary's into the third level against the safety, and he makes that guy miss for a touchdown.
Beautiful job from Singletary, both on the last play and this one, making one-on-one defenders miss, whether in the hole or deep downfield. This one I like, and you see the variation, great seal there by Ryan Bates in climbing to the second level. I like how he helps Van Roten just enough, bashes his man backwards.
Feed block was beautiful.
Gorgeous. Also, which was beautiful, look at the cut from Dawson Knox, just absolutely taking out 97. And then because of the feed block from Bates, defensive tackle, just falls down. So between Bates and Knox, they basically take out both defensive linemen on the right side. Bates then climbs to the second level again, taking advantage of that skill set, his athleticism, climbs to the second level. He seals. Singletary makes a great move on Brisker, who's a good safety, but a rookie coming from depth, and then takes it to the house. And again, playing to your strengths. What I also like on this one too, the variation that we would see from, these tackle wrap plays or dart, on the previous one, based on what the line did and how they blocked, Dawkins went around Spencer Brown. But this time, like you mentioned, Spencer Brown is inserting in between the guard and the center. So you get the same kind of action, but you get a different variation and a different look. And that allows you, again, to run this similar concept, but you can tweak it and add little wrinkles based on what defensive front you're getting. And it allows you, again, to just keep defenses off balance, even though you're using something you're comfortable with and you're good with. This is a good example of good execution, but good design and playing to the skill set of your players up front.
Right. And so now the other big concept that they made this look similar to and tied into their run game. This is another RPO type run that Singletary takes for a nice chunk play. But I want you to watch this linebacker and how he reacts to Morris right here, running that diagonal route to the flats. He vacates that area. So now you get the +1 with this mid-zone run. It looks very similar from the end zone angle, as you'll see, to the linebackers and defensive line. So here it is from the end zone angle. You're going to see Anzalone right here, number 34, vacate. So that just adds obviously one less guy in the box, but the footwork is the same. You see him attacking here, but then getting north and south, cutting it back inside. And so, a lot of the times this linebacker right here, front side, he's like, okay, do I cut back this way? Or is this, similar to that tackle pull where they could be inserting right here, pulling someone and inserting right there. This time, again, it's a box numbers count, but it looks the same. And you're going to see Devin Singletary break the arm tackle and then get into the secondary for another nice gain. But this time off of that mid-zone run. Looks very similar, same footwork, but it's getting north and south and getting up the field by the running backs.
You see that overcommitment from 55 towards front side, and Singletary just takes advantage of it, puts the foot in the ground, gets north and south, which also helps Ryan Bates set up his block like it allowed, because 55 over pursues. Bates can literally just come more vertical upfield, and then he actually executes a good block, but he doesn't even need to do much because the block is kind of set up for him already. The pass tag is so key, because Anzalone, like you said, has to honor Quentin Morris. So you pull him out of the box. You already had an advantage from the get-go because you've got 6 in the box against 5 offensive linemen and 1 tight end. So that's 6 on 6. But with 6 blockers up front, that means there's 7 gaps. So you already have a gap advantage against the defense. But then on top of it, you pull one of those guys out because of the pass tag and the route from Morris. So now you've only got 5 in the box. And this is on top of the formation that I liked, running stacks and putting them to the wide side of the field. Look what that's done to the defense. You've got the 2 defensive backs at the bottom of the screen by McKenzie and Davis, but then you've also got a tight end, or I'm sorry, tight end, a safety outside the hashes as well. So you've got 3/2 in a way. You've got the numbers advantage for the entire rest of your formation. And you've also spread the defense out. You've helped ID a little more of what they're trying to do and what their look is going to be. And then on the snap, yeah, you get Anzalone flowing with Morris, and you get 55 over pursuing, and you get a quick foot in the ground, and they take advantage on that mid-zone run. This was a nice, again, execution, but it's tied to the design and the scheme. Really well done from start to finish.
No, that's this is the last play we're gonna take a look at. This is another mid zone run. You have that RPO element again, this time versus Chicago. The box is a little more stacked here, but watch how the second level reacts to this mid zone run. Again, this is later in the game, so they already saw that tackle wrap with Singletary taking one to the house where he started on this side that kind of wrapped it back this way. But watch how Cook keeps it front side. But again, watch this linebacker react and almost look to anticipate that there's a bend back play with that tackle pulling. Watch that guy I circle. Watch how he shoots right there. Right there. He shot that gap thinking that wind back or bend back play was coming. That gives, Bates doesn't even have to touch him. I mean, Cook has the speed to get to that third level and then make that defender miss in the third level. I mean, this is what I mean by tying the concepts together. The formations look the same. The running back's footwork looks the same. They're not used to keying on tackles. So the interior guards and center all look the same in their footwork. And then just next thing you know, you get speed into that third level, and then you get 6 points on the board.
It really shows how damaging proper sequencing and scheming can be for an offense, and how detrimental it can be to the success of the defense if you're on that side of the ball. You just keep a defense off balance. And here you can see, 45 is kind of playing that game of, oh, I think I know what's coming. Let me shoot this here. And it's like, oh, no, it was the wrong spot. And then you have a back with the juice of James Cook. And now all of a sudden, if you have a back with less juice, where this is maybe like a 15 or 20 yard gain, instead it turns into a house call because he eats up that space so quickly. And this is an exciting thing for this offense when you're able to create these light boxes or take advantage of lighter boxes that are just given to you. Cook has the speed to make you pay in a heartbeat and churn out quick yardage, or again, make an angle that's a little bit improper, or, someone over pursues or under pursues to the ball. He's got the speed to take it to the house quickly. And again, this is nice. We showed a similar concept from this earlier. This is them running it in another game. This is what we started to see from like middle of January on, where they were able to hang their hat on, these mid-zone runs and dart, tackle wrap and kind of tie it all together, keep defenses off balance with that run game. The only real negative with it was they didn't run the ball more and kind of feed that. Yeah, like it just, especially with wanting to have that pivot and wanting to be versatile and dictating to defenses, it just seemed like a natural slam dunk. Like, oh, well, we've got this thing. Like, they'll probably just use it more. And it was like, no, they're not going to.
Right. Yeah, that was, some of the strengths or positives we thought we saw from Ken Dorsey's offense. Again, we rattled off some numbers, some adjusted line stats, showed you some film and how they tied it together into their run and pass game. They did throw some RPOs, some slant flats, some of those quick hitters off of those tackle wrap looks, off of that mid zone look, showing that mesh and then pulling it, reading that conflict defender and throwing it. But I thought they did a good job from that perspective, and I hope that they can carry some of that into next season. But we want to talk about some of the weaknesses, some of the areas of opportunity where they could be better. And I'll let you lead the charge here. What were some things that come to mind when you're talking about the Ken Dorsey offense and things they need to be better at?
From a high level perspective, I felt like there weren't enough easy buttons baked into the offense, or, layups, whatever verbiage, you kind of want to go with there. Again, like we talked about, and we're going to get into the specifics why, things just seemed very hard for this offense all the time. Even when things were working and they were like putting up like 30 points, it just seemed like they really had to drag those 30 points out of a game. And despite how efficient they were in all these metrics, it didn't feel efficient. And I felt like there were a lack of layups, especially as the offense became more Josh focused. I felt like it would have been nicer for Ken Dorsey to be able to take some off of his plate mentally or emotionally or physically and allow him to take a breather from time to time and kind of reset a bit. And again, I don't think it's completely fair to put it all onto Dorsey, but the lack of layups were a big one. And then from a specific standpoint, I thought they started to get predictable as the season went on. I think what they did early on that worked, it didn't seem like there was always an evolution of it, and
Or that
teams.
next layer or tier
Yes.
to the play concept, right?
Yes, or even just the nature of, like, to use the Super Bowl example, the Kadarius Toney touchdown, even the Sky Moore one as well, but the Kadarius Toney one I think sticks in people's brain more because of wide open, how wide open he was. The Chiefs used what they do. The Chiefs knew that the Eagles knew what they do, so they
Yeah.
used that against them to create an open touchdown. I felt like there could have been more of that from the Bills, where you're in these looks, and instead of running a follow concept, you do something different because the defense is starting to catch on that, oh, when they do this, they're going to run follow. Or the it happened a bunch of times when the run play that they would motion into, that they got stopped on 4th down against Tennessee, that Miami keyed into as well. Like, you
Oh, yeah,
started.
the duo read type play
Yes,
where yeah.
where Kevin Byard called it out. It was like week 2 and Kevin
And
Byard
then
knew it already.
Brandon Jones, I think, did it against the Dolphins, right? He came off the
Correct.
right side there. Yeah, they
Correct.
knew that was
Literally the
coming.
next week. And then Whitehead did it, I believe, for the Jets. Like, and so those little pieces where teams started to figure you out a bit, and that should have been, you shouldn't have been that predictable in general, but that should have been kind of like a warning flag or like a warning light or
Yeah.
alarm that we got to switch some things up
Switch it up.
tendency wise. And we just didn't see that next level or that layer that you said. And I think that left us wanting for a little bit more, especially because, again, like you mentioned early on in the year, they started out really well. It would have been nice to see those building blocks and then, continuing to add levels to the house.
Yeah, I do think that there were some formational tendencies that came about, as you said. I thought that we talked about it several times, so I don't want to rehash it too much and spend too much time on it. But the coverage beaters, we're going to break down a few of those and how Ken Dorsey seemed to attack coverages more so than getting his quarterback on track with stuff he's comfortable with. And we're going to see some of that in the film here in a little bit. And so I don't want to spend too much time on that. And for me, when that is a factor, it becomes of a quarterback just running the offense and not necessarily scheming guys open, just scheming whoever comes open based on the coverage. So you're not able to dictate who's getting the ball. You kind of have to go, if your first read on this concept is Stephon Diggs and they take him away, well, then ball's not going to be going to him. So you're running the offense. It's progression based. I thought that limited the offense in many ways. And we're going to show you how it was open early in the year, but then when you got to later in the year, especially in the playoffs, they kind of slowed it down against Miami and against Cincinnati. We'll show that in the film, but I want to bring up some of the splits because over the last few days, maybe over the last week, we heard players more and more talk about, Josh Allen's injury and how Stephon Diggs talked about how, weeks 1 to 9, like they were humming on offense. And then they just, as someone said in the chat, it looked like that, from week 10 on into the playoffs, that it was just so difficult for them. It was almost like pulling teeth each drive, each play. And I do agree with that feeling. So I want to look at some of the stats. We had Andrew go ahead and look up some of the tendencies. And so we did it by the splits that everyone has been talking about, mainly weeks 1 through 9. And then, weeks 10 to the playoffs, and some of the, the big things that stand out when it comes to the Bills' offensive tendencies, when you use those weeks as a split, are the average time to throw. So in the first 9 weeks, the Bills' average time to throw was 2.77. And keep in mind, this is all Bills quarterbacks, so there were some snaps in there, I believe, for Keenum. I looked it up just for Josh Allen, and it was actually lower. It was like 2.65. But this gives you, relatively speaking, how the offense was getting rid of the ball, in the first half of the year versus the second half. And you can see percentage of throws under 2.5 seconds was 52.8% as opposed to 43.9%. And that's what I want you guys to key in on. So 2.5 seconds, getting the ball out quickly. That was something they did really well in the first half. And Josh Allen was one of the best quarterbacks in the first 9 weeks because they were able to get rid of the ball so quickly. And then the second half, again, you see the average time to throw in weeks 10 through the divisional round, 3.08 seconds average time to throw. So he was holding on to the ball longer. They were obviously pushing the ball down the field further. You see some of the 2.5 seconds, the percentage of throws under 2.5 seconds, that dropped to 43.9%. And then you can see some of the ratios and how they changed. The big time throw percentage from first to second half actually went up, and his turnover plays, worthy plays, went down, which in many ways it didn't feel that way, right, Anthony?
Yeah, it felt like as the season went on, if anything, if you had to ask somebody like, oh, what would you bet, from a turnover worthy play perspective, like from weeks 10 through the division round, I think everybody would say it was higher than weeks 1 through 9 because of him actually turning the ball over, then pushing the ball further downfield. And you saw the impact on this offense. And again, it was a combination of things. They were calling those concepts to go down the field. And it was also, some of it was also on Josh, going big game hunting or big play hunting, as people are mentioning in the chat, and having some options underneath, but wanting to take that kill shot, or when he turns the ball over, instead of the next drive being like, okay, let's settle down, let's get in the game. In his mind, he's like, no, I need to make up double now for what just happened.
Yeah.
And then Ken Dorsey has a similar mindset. So he's like, yeah, let's go out and get blood right now. And you saw it affected. You saw how it affected the offense from an advanced metric perspective and standpoint, like we just showed.
Yeah, and so if we advance through some of these other stats, courtesy of PFF, so the first 9 weeks, drop passes per game were 1.5. From the weeks 10 on, 2.4. So that was a big increase. Yak percentage went down from 42.4% to 31.2%. EPA per play went down 0.229 to 0.059. Again, ADOT went up. That was obvious. And most of that happened. It started to go up right at that Jets Miami sequence where Josh just admitted that about 4 weeks after that injury, his arm started feeling better. And that's when they kind of kicked up the ADOT. But you can see it went up from 9.7 to 11.3 from first to second half. And then the open attempt percentage just means it's like PFF's way of saying guys are open or not. And it dropped about 5% or so. So I think when you look at some of these stats and splits, we went through so many different stats, Andrew and I, trying to find tendencies, things that stood out. And, I came into this show, Anthony, I told you before we went live, I came into this show thinking like, it was a pretty balanced, I had a pretty balanced view of this offense. And some of it was Josh, something like you just said, right? Kind of balance it. But I went through all these stats and I went through all this film looking at specific quadrants, 0 to 9 yards and all that good stuff. And I just came away, I don't know, the last 2 hours just before we went live, that Josh actually played pretty good, all things considered. But some of the things we talked about, like the offensive line, some of the weapons with the drops, as you just saw. I mean, look at how the weapons for the Bills fared against man coverage in the first to second half. Look at the drop percentage in weeks 1 to 9 against man coverage, 1.8%. And then weeks 10 and above, 11.9%.
That's huge. A 10 percentage point increase is a huge, like, I just want people to really understand that, to say like, oh, it only went up 10 percentage points. Percentage points, it takes a lot for a percentage point to go up. A 10.1 percentage point increase is massive.
Yeah. And then look at the big time throw percentage against man coverage, 3.3% to 11.1%. So Josh was big game hunting, but he was actually that Miami game. Remember that we did all 7 explosive passes in that game late in the year. So you can see the ADOT rose from 8.9 to 14.3 versus man coverage, but also that quick pressure percentage, which is pressure on Josh Allen in 2.5 seconds or less. That actually increased as well from 29.5% to 35.3% against man coverage. Again, so it's one thing that we've talked about recently with the Bills offense is the Bills lost their fastball in many ways. And it's something that I want to talk about here in a second about the weapons that he had this year. And I always compare it to 2020, right? That was the height of this offense and how it was just always humming. They didn't slow down. They were one of the most efficient offenses in the league. So when I look back at that and I see, late in the year, them go out and re-sign Cole Beasley and re-sign John Brown, that tells me that they're trying to get back to 2020. And that tells me what they need going forward.
And it also real quick for Brett, ADOT is average depth of target. So basically how far the person he's throwing the ball to is downfield. So if somebody is 5 yards from the line of scrimmage and that's who Josh targets, his average depth of target is 5 on that play. And then you obviously take it within all the targets and average it out on a per target basis. Good question. Also, good job,
Yeah,
AJ, bringing that question up. Yeah, we saw, so them also trying to find that easy button again that they had in 2020 by going back to those guys. But it also speaks to them acknowledging or realizing like, we don't have that on the team right now. And I think that also speaks to, again, we're not giving anybody a pass, but when you're looking at everything holistically, yes, there was some on Ken Dorsey. Yes, there was some on Josh Allen from a decision-making standpoint, but his weapons were inconsistent in terms of their reliability. His offensive line was inconsistent in terms of their reliability. You saw the quick pressure numbers. You saw the increases in drop percentage versus man coverage. You saw the open attempt percentage in the graphic before that. And when you take that coupled with not having the consistency from the slot and the consistency to impact the middle of the field and be a safety blanket for Josh and or open up other avenues for the offense, it was a cascading effect negatively for this offense. And the Bills didn't have that diversity in their skill set amongst their weapons in order to combat that and really kind of flow or evolve as a position group. And I think that hindered what Josh was able to do, but I also think it hindered what Ken Dorsey was able to do as well,
Yeah.
And again, I know everybody wants Dorsey's head on a stick, and so I don't want to seem like a Ken Dorsey apologist, but everybody keeps talking about a lot of, well, you got to scheme guys open and you got to scheme this. And yes, like how usage from a player stems from what coordinators and coaches decide to do, but players' skill sets and traits and abilities decide how they are able to be used and what situations they can be put in. And again, at the end of the day, it was an amalgamation and combination of a bunch of things that resulted in some sluggishness for this offense. And if we're just looking at it from a Josh Allen standpoint, yeah, we saw how his weapons and the offensive line really, not to be so harsh, but brought him down and put even more onto his plate. And, I think that also contributed to him playing a little more of that hero ball and trying to do more big game hunting. He'll never say it, but I think in his mind, he knew this offensive line isn't reliable and my weapons are dropping some balls. I need to go and make a play. And then that compounded. And I think that contributed to his decision-making, which is still on him, but everything's all connected and kind of how this team chased its tail a little bit as the season went on.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I came to the conclusion that Josh Allen played better than I remember, to be honest. He finished in number 2 in EPA, expected points added, on passes from the pocket. So from the pocket, no outside the pocket.
I thought he can't throw from the pocket because he doesn't know how to
number
do stuff
2.
like that.
Number 2, he was 10th in 2021. We talked about the big time throws, 7.6% for the year. That was number 1. Rodgers was number 2 at 5.7%. So a big difference. And then 12 touchdowns deep. So yes, he was big game hunting, but again, they kind of needed that variance in some of those big plays down the field. They needed it to kind of offset it, but it also led to some turnovers. That was probably, again, my biggest weakness and gripe with Josh Allen this year was the turnovers. 16 fumbles. Granted, 16 fumbles overall. He only lost, I believe, 6 of them. 5 of them were basically bobbled snaps, whether from shotgun or under center, and 3 of those were with backup center. So again, context there to that. And then, the right tackle spot, whether it was Spencer Brown or Questenberry, they were turnstiles for a majority of the year. I know you got some stats to back that up, right, Ant?
Yeah, I do have some stats, and they are not favorable for Mr. Spencer Brown. One quick piece as well on the Josh Allen turnover piece. He had so many this year. He only had 1 more this year than he did the previous year with Brian Dable. So I know that was a piece that people tried to lay at Dorsey, like, look at all the Allen turnovers, but it was something that plagued him last year as well. But on to Spencer Brown. So PFF's efficiency score for offensive linemen, that measures pressures allowed on a per snap basis, weighting towards sacks allowed. There were 88 offensive tackles in the NFL in 2022 that had at least 20% of pass protection snaps. Of those 88 offensive tackles, Spencer Brown was tied for 69th in efficiency score. And he was almost 4 full points below Tristan Wirfs, who finished first. Wirfs was first at 99.3. Brown was again at 69th at 95.6. It may seem small that it's only 4 points, basically. That's big in their efficiency metric. And then if you're looking at true pass sets, Those are plays that exclude less than 4 rushers. They don't count play action, don't count screens or short dropbacks or throws under 2 seconds. So it's more of a true measure
Yeah.
of you going up against defensive linemen or the scheme and system and seeing how you fare. Of the 206 offensive linemen, so tackles, centers, guards, of the 206 offensive linemen with at least 20% of pass protection snaps this year, Brown was tied for 180th out of those 206 offensive
Jeez.
linemen in pass block efficiency in true pass sets at a score of 92.5. Wirfs was first again at 99.1, so almost full 7 points below Wirfs. And then if you're just looking at tackles, so again, he was 69th overall. He was 70th amongst those 88 tackles in true pass sets from an efficiency standpoint. And if anybody just wants another little cherry on top from a volume perspective, he was tied for the 8th most pressures allowed in 2022 amongst all offensive linemen with 50 pressures allowed. And that was tied for 5th most amongst all tackles. And then he was tied for the 3rd most pressures in true pass sets allowed amongst all offensive linemen. So not
Not
great.
good. Not good at all there. Jim asked.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay.
CAR got me. Oh, goodness gracious.
Jim asked, can the issues you see on film with Brown be fixed, or has he hit his ceiling? Yeah, I do think it can be fixed. Again, injury being thrown in there, not to have an excuse, but that plays a part when you're that tall. Back issues are a thing. Whether they get better or not with him, I don't know. But you could see some of that athleticism was limited this year when it came to especially recovery and his ability to anchor versus guys that were going speed to power. But I also think some of what Cromer was asking of him stressed his skill set this year with that, limited athleticism. And we saw his pads just way too high in a lot of those vertical sets where he's getting depth. He's waiting for that guy to build up speed, come to him, and that guy was just blowing through him and putting him on the turf at times. So I do think he can be better. I'm not out on Spencer Brown, but I am down to draft a guy and bring a guy in. And that's something that we're going to talk about for another day. But yeah, the offensive line was an issue for the Bills this year. A lot of it was at right tackle, whether Spencer Brown or Quessenberry being in there when Brown went down. Roy says, so basically Spencer Brown gets an F grade. Yeah, it was that bad.
Not great.
It was that bad. I mean, as I talked about the 16 fumbles from Josh Allen, 3 of them were strip sacks from like Spencer Brown's block. 2 of them were from Quessenberry being in there. And that one was when Josh Allen got hurt.
Yeah, that one where Huff got him right around the edge, beat Quessenberry in what seemed like a half a second or at most a second. And that's the piece too, right? Like when Spencer Brown or even Quessenberry would agree, but leading it with Brown, when he gets beat, he gets beat like real bad. It's not like, he held up and then he gets beat in the blink of an eye. He gets put. He almost like I've never seen like a defensive end execute a snatch trap on a tackle. Like it's usually the other way around, but like Brown will lean out so much and just get chopped and like fall down on his face. And, he gets beat in a variety of ways through him, around him, on the inside. But again, I'm in a very similar boat, as we've talked about since the Senior Bowl. I would like to see them address that right tackle spot in the draft. But I don't think hope is lost. His ceiling is still high, and that injury piece influenced him and this entire offensive line. Chemistry is so important with an offensive line. Brown missed a bunch of the offseason and training camp. So did Roger Saffold. They didn't get that time to gel until they were mid-year when they were finally playing together. And even that didn't really happen because Brown was injured again during the year and Mitch Morse got knocked a little bit and Bates was moving around. And again, if we're just focusing on Brown, his calling card is his athleticism while he learns how to play right tackle on the job in the NFL. And if he can't hang his hat on that athleticism, he's going to be treading water, and he kind of drowned a little bit at times this year.
Yeah. And so I kind of want to, flash back to kind of what we're talking about when it came to Josh Allen's targets. We talked about man coverage, how they had a lot of drops. And I've just been on this kick lately where, again, I'm comparing this year, which is probably unfair, to 2020 and how efficient they were. But it's kind of what was needed this year for Josh Allen in this offense, especially when you talked about the easy button, like when you're talking a new offensive coordinator who should know the track and way to get Josh Allen on track, right?
Mhm.
You would think a guy in the room with him for the last several years would have the easy button
Yeah.
answers, but that wasn't always the case. But when I look back, and we talked about adding Cole Beasley and John Brown, when I look back to that 2020 and how they used those guys and where they really attacked, it was really the middle of the field, Anthony. So I want to start with that because I felt like at times this year, the Bills really avoided throwing it over the middle.
Mm.
And so, you know what? Let me bring it up. I think there's a reason behind that.
Mm.
And it starts with the weapons and it
Mhm.
starts with Josh Allen. So let's take a look at that. So they avoided the middle of the field a bunch. So let's look at interceptions. Let's look at drops. Okay. So deep center. So that's 20 yards or more in the middle of the field. He had 3 interceptions there. Intermediate center. So that's 10 to 19 yards. He had 2 interceptions there. Short center. He had, so that's 0 to 9 yards in the middle of the field. He had 2 interceptions. Now let's go look at the drops in those very same areas over the middle of the field. Deep center, only 1 drop. Intermediate center, 6 drops. 6 drops, 2 interceptions in the intermediate area, which is 10 to 19 yards. And then short center, middle of the field, 0 to 9 yards, 7 drops. So it's pretty apparent that Josh Allen throwing over the middle of the field probably got a little gun shy at times because he didn't really have weapons that he could trust. So it led to interceptions and it led to a lot of drops.
And then I think that also led to some of the predictability we saw in this offense as the season went on. Like you saw him almost by default looking towards the numbers or looking outside the numbers. And those throws are going to be lower percentage just because they're farther than right over the middle of the field. He pushed the ball downfield as well, kind of just give himself some more leeway. And, now you're bringing up this heat map from Stephon Diggs.
Yeah.
And
Just to
this
give an
is,
example, this is
yep.
Diggs's distribution where he caught where passes were caught, where they were incomplete in his touchdowns. And you can see the completions they're pretty concentrated in that short area, but also towards the middle of the field, right? I know, right?
Yeah.
But so this is weeks 1 through 9. So you heard Diggs talk about that, how things kind of change. So short area, middle of the field. Now this is weeks 10 and beyond. You can see a lot of those completions started to be closer to the numbers and even more along the boundaries, Anthony. So again, this is just Diggs, but it gives you an idea how they kind of avoided throwing over the middle of the field.
Yeah, it was an area that Josh clearly didn't feel comfortable going towards from a target perspective. And I also think, again, tying it back to the roster piece or the weapons piece, they just didn't have that consistency in the slot and that person to really affect the middle of the field. So much of what Cole Beasley did, his work came, not just because he was in the slot, but if you're in the slot, you're the closest person in proximity to the middle of the field, and his ability to work in that spot and how it opened up avenues and layers for the rest of the offense was a huge piece. And they didn't get that this year from Isaiah McKenzie or Jamison Crowder, really, even before he was hurt. And then you added in on top of this graphic where you look at the short area production from 0 to 9 yards, the leaders on the Bills the last 3 years. Eric, these numbers are drastic from 2022 versus 21 and 20.
Yeah, just look at the targets in the ranking in parentheses. So 0 to 9 yards, short area, the top 2 receivers in that area on the Bills over the last 3 years. So Diggs had 78 targets. That was ranked 4th in that area. And McKenzie for the Bills had 41 targets, which was ranked 40th in 2022. And you can see some of the other numbers that kind of accompany that. But look at the targets for 2021. Beasley had 79 targets in that 0 to 9 range, which was 5th overall. And Diggs had 77, which was 7th overall. Now, if we go back to 2020, Diggs had 92 targets in that 0 to 9 range, which was 2nd overall. Beasley had 76, which was 10th overall. So again, having that crutch, and these aren't all over the middle, but those are the separator type wide receivers that the Bills like, the crutch, that hot route or sight adjustment in the middle of the field or inside the numbers there when they need a play. Those guys were making it in that 0 to 9 yard range.
Stephon Diggs is Josh Allen's number 1 guy, but Cole Beasley has been his security blanket the past several years, and missing that security blanket significantly impacted him, as did, missing that consistency in that role. Even just looking from a numbers perspective, Stephon Diggs saw the second highest slot percentage from a snap share perspective, his second highest usage rate in the slot of his career this past year at 34.1%. That was second only to his second year in Minnesota, where he was mainly in the slot at 63%. But again, he was in the slot this year 34.1%. In 2021, he was in the slot 21% of the time. So a 13 percentage point increase. Even Dawson Knox, his slot usage went up 6 percentage points, 47.9 this year versus 41.7 in 2021. We saw the impact that not having that security blanket, whether specifically in Cole Beasley or just in somebody who could navigate that role, we saw the impact it had on the offense. And it's part of the reason to give some of you folks a little focus as we move forward in the offseason. A lot of the focus for us in looking for a wide receiver in the draft or in free agency isn't necessarily just about like, well, you got to get a wide receiver too, or you got to get this. What you need somebody who can operate in the slot in a fashion that fits what Josh Allen and this offense needs, a la Cole Beasley. You need somebody who is like a younger Cole Beasley who can offer you that consistency and security on the inside.
Yeah, and you talked about the percentage of that Diggs was in the slot. That's fine. Like moving him around is great. We like that all year this year. Yeah. But when they bumped him inside, then they lost a boundary wide receiver, a boundary threat. And that used to be, again, that was like a John Brown, right? He would be out there. So it would be Diggs and Brown on the outside. Gabriel Davis is fine as a boundary wide receiver. They basically didn't use him in the slot at all. So when they bumped Diggs inside, you lost a boundary threat out there. McKenzie wasn't that guy. Shakir wasn't quite ready. And they obviously brought Brown back for that reason. And so that really tells you something. And to kind of cap off, attacking the middle of the field, finding that receiver that can not only play the boundary, but bump inside, a diverse set, maybe it's an early wide receiver, but either way, they need to get someone to help in the middle of the field. Maybe that is Diggs as he translates later into his career, and maybe he becomes that slot guy that is the crutch for this offense. But then you do have to add that other guy outside. Why, we appreciate you, man. Thanks for that compliment. So to kind of cap this off, if you look at quarterback passes by direction in 2020, again, we talked about it several times. Josh Allen in the middle of the field. Look at mid DYAR and mid DVOA. So in 2020, he was 8th in DR and then 5th in mid DVOA. And so if you go ahead and look at 2022, so 8th and 5th overall, remember that. If you look this year, he was 16th and 18th. So again, you want to be efficient in the middle of the field. It's been so important for this offense. It's been so important for Josh Allen because, again, it's the biggest part of the field. The middle is the biggest part of the field. And the Bills just avoided it in so many ways. And again, maybe it had to do with the drops. Maybe it had to do with the interceptions and turnovers. Either way, they need to find someone that Josh Allen trusts and has a rapport with in the middle so that they can be a threat in there to open things up outside in a more efficient way where they're just not chucking it deep on 2nd and 10.
Being able to attack the middle of the field, exactly you said, it opens up all the other avenues. Just even in the short, on the outside or in the median on the outside or just deep, you need to be able to work that part of the field. 1, to open up the other areas, but 2, just because you need to stay versatile, you cannot have a section of the field closed off to you at any point, but especially the middle, even just from a physics standpoint. Think of what's easier if you're completing a pass 5 yards in front of you or 5 yards outside the numbers. Because that 5-yard throw outside the numbers is actually a longer throw. It's a harder throw. Usually you have to layer a little bit.
And less space the further outside you throw. So how much yak are you giving up by not attacking the middle of the field?
It's a harder piece. And, you see the question coming in from John saying, did the loss of Crowder hurt? I potentially, if you want to make that case, maybe. But even before, I mentioned it earlier, granted the sample size will influence things, but even before he got hurt, the chemistry with Josh wasn't there. The feel for the inside. He didn't
quite have the playbook down.
No, it was. And again, it's hard to be a receiver in this Bills offense. We heard Tavon Austin talk about it. We've heard a bunch of receivers talk about it. And I also want to bring it up because I kind of want to pat myself on the back. I can't tell you how many people got at me on Twitter who, when I said, man, Cole Beasley will be missed, and it was like July, and they were like, no, Jamison Crowder is going to be better. He's like 0.5 more yards after catch in his career than Beasley. He's going to be so much better.
He played with bad quarterback, so
he never had anybody like Josh. It's hard to fill that role, and I think we saw not only how important this role is, but how hard it can be to fill it. And, we saw flashes from Isaiah McKenzie in training camp. Like, I think, Eric, you and I don't want to
Yeah.
speak for you, but we were very encouraged by what Isaiah McKenzie did in training camp. We saw him running Cole Beasley like routes.
Yeah. The route
And we
running stood out.
Yes. So we weren't even thinking Crowder. We were thinking, well, this is going to be Isaiah McKenzie's spot. Fingers crossed, we'll see it. And it just didn't translate. And then even for Crowder, maybe he could have turned into that guy as the season progressed, but it's a big maybe because before he got hurt, it was real wishy-washy in terms of what he was going to be for this offense.
Yeah. And so again, we talked about the areas of opportunity when it came to personnel, plans of attack, tendencies, and stuff. So we want to talk about some of those weaknesses and things that they could improve on with some film now, outside of the stats, outside of some of those tendencies. And one thing that came up all season for me, man, was some of the, and I know a lot of fans, it kind of jumped in on this as well, is the spacing of these routes. Some of the spacing of his calls and concepts really annoyed me. But I will say, as a disclaimer, the Bills run a lot of run and shoot concepts where a wide receiver or a running back are reading leverage, are reading coverages post snap. And so it's not a West Coast offense where you're running 5 steps ball and you're making a break and the ball's going to be there. There's a lot of, hey, you got to get open, you got to find green, and then, air raid type concepts, right? So the spacing is going to be an issue from time to time, but I thought, especially like on this play where Josh throws an interception, this play to the bottom, Gabe Davis is in a tight alignment. Cook gets out into an angle or Texas route out of the backfield, and just watch how close they are. Granted, they're open. They are open. I will say that I think if Josh throws it to Gabriel Davis, this linebacker may jump it, but maybe Josh could fit it in there low. Gabe goes down and gets it on his shoelaces right at the goal line. He rolls in for a touchdown. That's possible. James Cook, also open, but also a very dangerous throw, especially knowing, as we know, Josh Allen doesn't throw slant type routes, routes to running backs all that well. It's not really a strength of his. In fact, he's one of the worst when it comes to on target percentage on these type of routes. But again, it's open. So if you're talking concept, did it work or did it not? I would give it to Dorsey. This is not a bad call. But again, Josh doesn't like throwing this, and he knows, again, throwing to the middle of the field, it's a dicey play in the red zone. So he doesn't throw it. So he's got decent blocking. He extends the play. And at this point, he should be throwing it away. But instead, he tries throwing it towards Gabe Davis. Alexander jumps in there and intercepts it. But from the end zone angle, and this is one of those plays. Hey, okay, I can live with you not taking that shot because who knows? Maybe you're gonna, a turnover happens or that guy's gonna jump it. Fine. You're trying to extend the play. Cool. I like that. No one's open. Throw it away. He's gotten away with this a couple times this year. One to James Cook against the Patriots, right? But on this play, throw it away here. You don't want to see that. But again, I put this on Dorsey. Like the spacing on that call, on that concept was not good. But either way, bad decision from Josh Allen.
And this plays a good example of what we talked about earlier, where it's like a little bit of everyone. Like, yes, the spacing and design could be a bit better. Yes, Josh could have fit that ball in potentially and completed it to either Gabe Davis or to James Cook, or the end all be all at the end of the day, just throw it away at the end. This is something interesting you're highlighting from Jair Alexander. I noticed it on this one, and on one of the plays later we're going to show from the Jets between Sauce Gardner and Jordan Whitehead. A lot of pre-snap communication, and then after they communicate pre-snap, I can't surmise and say like they knew what was coming, but what happens post-snap with the type of communication they have pre-snap, you could make an assumption that like, oh, did they know what was coming on this play? Like, like some kind of inkling. And again, which is fair. Jair Alexander is a phenomenal corner, as is Sauce Gardner with the play we'll show later. So that's another piece, right? Like the initial design isn't necessarily the best. It's also maybe predictable based on what we're seeing from how the Packers communicate pre-snap and what they do post-snap. Josh also could have potentially, fit this ball in. Josh also could have thrown it away and not turned it over. It's the only thing we're missing on this play is like a bad route and horrible blocking up front for it to be everything that affected the Bills offense in this year negatively. But again, it's not any one that's the 90%. It's this thing. It's all these little combinations adding up and being a multitude of things.
Yeah. Again, a few things went wrong on this one, but all of it could have been erased if he just threw it away, threw it into the stand.
But again, like you talked about, though, that's That's the yin and yang of Josh Allen, because
Yeah.
if he makes this throw, it's, oh my God, this is amazing. He pulled a rabbit out of his hat and made something out of nothing. But then if he makes an
Good with the
interception,
bad.
correct. That James Cook throw, if he doesn't complete that, he bled the clock and cost the Bills an opportunity to
No
get 3
points.
points at the end of first half. Yeah, but
Yep.
he made a throw and we forget it and we say, man, that was an amazing touchdown. The yin and
Yeah.
yang.
Yeah. And so that was against the Packers. What was that? Week 8. And this is
Yes, coming
Minnesota.
out of the bye week.
Yeah. So this is Minnesota week 10, I think. So either way, it's a couple of games advanced. Same concept, but it's a 3-by-1 set. So trips bunch. So you have Gabriel Davis running that crossing route a little deeper, and then McKenzie is sneaking behind him on that follow concept. So again, this is 2 weeks later. Look at the spacing again.
This is week
So
10 for Minnesota. Just, you
yeah,
were correct. Yeah.
right. So, you're running the same type of concept, and yes, they're open, but Josh doesn't like throwing this, and you're still calling these
And the
plays.
spacing is shitty again, as is the timing from McKenzie's
Yes.
route.
And so again, they're open, and maybe even more so than before, because this guy's looking this way, 3-over-2, and then these guys blow the coverage. They let Gabriel Davis and McKenzie go. Josh should be throwing it, and he should be throwing it to Gabriel Davis for a touchdown. But he holds it and then throws it late. You can see him like almost reset his arm and throw it there, and it just goes incomplete. You can't even really tell who it was going to, whether it was McKenzie or Gabriel Davis. So again, your quarterback, is not, he doesn't like making these throws. He's not confident in these throws. And the spacing is always off on these follow concepts, but yet you run them all year in high leverage situations, a lot of third down in 2 to 5 situations. And it leads to plays like this. And we don't even know who the ball was going to there.
I like the follow concept as an idea, but I don't think the receivers or the options the Bills use it for, like Davis and McKenzie, I don't think their skill set lends to being successful in these concepts. You have to have a specific pacing. Yeah, different Cole Beasley, but it's fine because everybody can fill Cole Beasley's spot. It's easy to do what he does. You need to have a certain level of understanding of pacing and leverage, and then a sharpness and a suddenness to your game. And that's not Gabe Davis's strong suit from a suddenness perspective. And McKenzie's, in terms of pacing his route, he's still growing and learning in that perspective. So yeah, I don't like the call again. I don't like the spacing. But again, we're sitting here with like
third down too.
It is third down. Yep. High leverage situation. But again, even with all of it, like you said, like Davis is wide open. Pull, bang, touchdown. I don't even, I think on the first one with the Packers, like you said and pointed out, you could make the case like, does that linebacker get in there? Does Jair close down? Maybe. Yeah, Harrison Smith has his eyes focused on Stephon Diggs to the right. Gabriel Davis is clearing, as you have pointed out. Like, just throw the ball. You don't need to double clutch. You don't need to hitch. That ball should already be out and on its way to Gabe Davis by now. This should have been a touchdown still. So again, combination of things. Josh Allen could have made this throw, pulled the trigger. Even when he double clutches it and throws it late, he still could have completed this to Gabe Davis.
I know.
He throws it between both of them and it goes to no one. But look at, if he puts it on Gabe Davis, if anybody was thinking, well, Harrison Smith is right there, he's not. Like, that's still a touchdown throw to Gabe Davis. So you have inaction and hesitancy from Josh Allen. And then even with that, it still could have been a touchdown, but he dirts it and makes a bad throw. And that's on top of it not being a great spacing design, or maybe not even being a concept that Josh Allen likes. So again, a multitude of things that still could have been corrected for in the execution. But at the end of the day, it's still all these little things adding up, leading to the one overall negative.
Yeah. And so again, it starts at the top. It starts with Dorsey. And so now we're going to get into, that was just something that really I've talked about all year on social media, on Twitter, that I want to just point out and show you that even though we critiqued Ken Dorsey throughout the year about some of the spacing of these routes, there was still plays to be made, especially to guys in high leverage situations. So I talked about how good the Bills were on third down. And obviously, if you're good on third down and you're in those 3rd and 6.4 yard situations, very manageable situations on third down, you're good on early downs. And one of the concepts that the Bills ran a lot of, especially like the first half of the year, was this concept here. And it's a levels concept. So you have 2 in-breaking routes at different levels to the top of the screen. And then you have a go route to the bottom, and then an out route from the slot. If you guys remember, and if you got tuned into the film room over the summer, we broke this play and concept down with Isaiah Hodgins, and he broke it down perfectly for us. It's a concept the Bills like to use against 2 high safety looks. And so here's one. I want to show a couple plays how, this is against Detroit, where top of the screen, the first read for Josh Allen with these two high looks is right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's pretty simple. But again, this is Ken Dorsey and Josh Allen attacking the coverage, right, Anthony? We talked about that. A very good cover 2 zone type beater here. So Diggs is wide open, you hit him. And so Diggs is taught as that primary read to not just fast flow through the zone right here. You see him kind of hold up, and that's because you're going to have Anzalone right there, right, as that wall defender. Isaiah talked about that. So he kind of sits in that window, catches the ball. And again, it's a high efficiency pass and throw. And the Bills ran it a lot, and they completed it a lot. Here's one from that Vikings game, right, Ant? They're sending pressure to the top of the screen, the route concepts to the bottom. So you have the in-breaker from Diggs, a deeper in-breaker at a different level from Knox, the out route from McKenzie, and then the goal route from Gabriel Davis. And again, this is another one where he kind of sits in that window because this guy is taking speed off of that. You see the off coverage, just a nice little void right there. It's really efficient pass for Diggs, and he's able to get some yards after the catch.
Yeah, that's the benefit of having Stephon Diggs, who's so savvy in terms of reading coverage. And this is just we hate to make it sound so simple, but this is just pitch and catch. And again, even in something as simple as this play, a lot of things went into it. But you have that easy read from Diggs. He slow plays it basically, and if he sees the off coverage and what's going on inside, he's just going to sit and kind of turn this in route or over drag aspect and kind of just sit there and turn it into a little hitch route or a China route, and then sit and make himself available to Josh. He gets square, shows his numbers, and then you highlighted it, and that's the real piece. Love how he catches it and peeks, and he knows like the angle that the corner is going to take, so he breaks on that left foot because he sees 23 cutting to the inside, and he just pivots and pirouettes and turns over his outside shoulder and then does his little we got to come up with a name for that little like high step that he does to kind of throw defenders off, and then he ends up getting the first down, creating a little yard after catch. But it's all set up from the initial design, attacking the coverage, Diggs and Allen both reading it and making it an easy completion because of what the Vikings did.
Yeah, this was one of those, again, coverage beaters. They ran this a lot on first and second down and at a high rate of completion, and they were just able to get, 6, 7, 8 yards on the play. So here's another play. This one's from the Browns game. Again, they ran this a lot of 2x2 sets, so 2 receivers to each side of the field. They did bust it out later in the year from a trip set where they had 3 levels. But you're going to see on this play, with the ball on the left hash, and Josh Allen sees that too high look again, but now Diggs is taken away. So that first read's taken away. So the second read is Dawson Knox coming over the middle. Again, out breaking route here, go route there. But watch how Josh waits for that window to open up right here to Knox. He's able to hit it over the middle. So you saw the first read throw to Diggs. This time that's taken away. So he moves on to his second option, Dawson Knox over the middle. Again, attacking the middle of the field. They just didn't do it enough this season.
Yeah, this is where they definitely didn't do it enough. And this is where that levels concept comes in. You can see number 28, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah for the Cleveland Browns. You'll watch him as Erik draws that arrow there. He clamps down once he sees the flash from Stephon Diggs. So he sees Diggs come across. So he's occupied by that low aspect, the levels. It's basically like a high-low. So the low draws in that linebacker, which then opens up the high for Dawson Knox. Grant Delpit, number 22, just hesitates a little bit at the top of Knox's break, and Allen just puts the ball right in. But even on this one, so Allen puts the ball on Knox, and Knox bobbles it. Even on this successful play, it's just everything was just pulling teeth, all of these little pieces. But again, the initial design, the attack, and the adjustment, right? What Erik, what you showed on the previous couple plays, you got that zone coverage, that off coverage on the outside. So Diggs just sits on the China. This time he continues on that short in, going across the field, adjusts it based on the coverage. Allen reads it, pulls it back in, immediately goes to number 2. Owusu-Koramoah comes up onto Diggs. It creates the space for Knox. This is well designed and well executed. But again, still kind of pulling teeth to a degree.
Yeah, and so now we go on to a play against the Jets later in the year. So same concept, again, working 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep that in mind. So ball snapped. You see Josh move on from Diggs because these two guys jumped that route. He can't hit number 2 because Mosley's sitting in that window. Number 3 is way out there. But by the time he gets to number 3, what happens? Quinnen Williams is there to bring him down. So again, now against these better defenses, you're seeing them take away those reads. They tightened up on Diggs. They jumped that under route from him, take him away. Number 2 right there, taken away. There's a guy over the top. Mosley's sitting, just waiting. He kind of even ducked down a little bit like, hey, you don't see me.
He's
baiting him, right? So now he's going to 3. Well, guess what? He can't get there because of Rodgers, Saffold. Quinnen Williams will push-pull, and he takes him down for the sack for a 9-yard loss on an early down.
This is that play I mentioned earlier where pre-snap Sauce at the bottom, number 1, and that near side safety, Jordan Whitehead, they communicate a lot pre-snap, and they're talking to one another. And then you see it already there. They got hand signals. They're checking with one another. It's almost kind of like Sauce is like, yo, you know what's coming? And Whitehead's like, I got it. And then you see 56, Quincy Williams, after Sauce and Whitehead kind of chop it up and seeing what's going on, like you highlighted, Quincy Williams just makes a beeline to get underneath that Stephon Diggs route. Like he just gets out of the gate and just zooms and comes screaming down to get underneath. And like you said, Dawson Knox is now unavailable. But again, can you get to number 3 or can you get to number 4? But the offensive line doesn't hold up. When I was in huddle, I went in slow motion to time this from snap to when Saffold gets beat. Saffold gets beat in about almost 2.1 seconds from the time the ball is snapped to the time Quinnen Williams gets past him. And then once Quinnen Williams makes contact, it's about 2.5, 2.6. So Williams beats his man within 2 seconds. Pressure. Very quick pressure, which again is part of the percentages that we highlighted earlier for you folks and show what he was doing.
They were second. They were one of the worst teams when it came to quick pressure.
Yeah. And
this is a quick game. This is a quick game concept.
So that's what I was like. Like everybody thinks like, oh, well, yeah, but they're getting pressure and they're going downfield. This is quick game. Like, so if your offensive line is losing, even when you go quick game, like think about what happened in week 1 against the Rams. The Bills went quick game as a way to neutralize Aaron Donald. But even as the year went on, they went quick game and they were losing so bad up front that even the quick game couldn't neutralize the rushes up front. And if you can't neutralize the rush and the coverage concept on the back end has your first couple options taken away, you don't have time to get to 3 and 4. You're dead in the water.
Right. And so now we go on to the Bengals game. First quarter, 6 seconds left in the first quarter here. So we're in the play script. All right. You're still in the play script. Here's your same concept, your levels concept. I circled the slot defender Hilton there because you see him kind of messing with the Bills offensive line and Josh Allen, making it look like he is going to be rushing off the edge here. But that's just to get the attention of everyone. You see him kind of drop into his zone here underneath. And what the Bengals do is they send this guy off. So I'll show you from the end zone angle, but that movement by Hilton caused the offensive line to slide out here and send the extra offensive lineman towards Hilton, thinking he's going to blitz because he's one of the better blitzing slot defenders in the league. But he dropped out, and so did this defensive end. So it's still a 4-man rush, but because of the way the Bills offensive line slid to their right, no one is able to pick up this guy. Maybe Cook is supposed to, but he's so worried about everything going on to the field that he doesn't. So now Josh Allen has a free rusher against this concept that early in the year was working. But what happens to his first read? Taken away, right? What happens to his second read? He can't even make the break yet with this guy already on him. Quick pressure from the Bengals, schemed up perfectly against this Bills offensive line, against this quick game concept, and they're able to bring Josh Allen down in the play script of Ken Dorsey.
I love that the Bengals, they make it look like man coverage ahead of time. Like you see Von Bell, number 24, like he's coming down in the box and lining up head up on Dawson Knox. And it looks like man coverage. And then Hilton showing blitz from the other side. And so everything the Bills do makes sense. But this is the Bengals knowing that and gaming up the Buffalo Bills offensive line and their entire offense. And I love the point that you had about like the pressure gets in so fast. Dawson Knox isn't even out of his break by the time Von Bell is already getting pressure onto Allen. And you highlighted the slide. So you've got Deion Dawkins one-on-one with a side, number 58 on the left side, but everyone else is sliding over. You see Brown, you see Bates, you see Morse, and then you've got Saffold on 95. And because they all slide, this creates that free runner off this creeper pressure from Von Bell. You've got two guys on 68. You've got your center in Mitch Morse blocking no one. And then you've got two one-on-ones. And then you've got James Cook also in the backfield, who's in no man's land. He's not in the route distribution. He's not blocking anyone. This is, to connect it, one of the reasons you and I love simulated pressures and creeper pressures, because of how you can mess up protection schemes and use teams' rules against them. It is beautiful. I would love to see the Bills use more simulators and creepers as needed. And then you tie that all in with what happens on the back end. They basically turn the Bengals into Tampa 2 with Eli Apples, one of the deep half safeties, as a corner, but as a function in that deep half safety at the bottom of the field. They get a little reroute on Stephon Diggs up top with Cam Taylor-Britt and use that cloud corner, and then they drop underneath everything else. So Diggs,
everything's pretty covered. It's covered pretty well. Even if Josh had time, this is probably not even open.
No,
he would have to make it to 3 here, but you have this defender Hilton dropping into that area.
Sneaking underneath, like they have everything layered and clamped down. At best, you're going to force Allen to make a tight throw or a hard throw, which I guess he is capable of. But on that day, that's a low percentage throw.
Hash.
Yes, from the far hash. Like we've seen him do it before. We've highlighted those throws on the show a whole bunch. But it's a hard throw to make. But he doesn't even get to it because they use the protection rules of the Bills against them. They execute it. And this play, one that had worked for them so much, the Bengals have it gamed up on this play with a really creative pressure look and a really creative coverage look on the back end. And it just works out where it works against everything the Bills were doing on that play. And Allen wasn't able to be a Superman on that one.
Yeah. And, you've heard analysts talk about it's Josh Allen centric. Yes, we've always said like it is. That's their identity. But we've highlighted areas of opportunity. And one of them is getting more targets for Josh Allen, getting him more wide receivers, getting him help up front so that you don't have to have a Bobby Hart in here to push the ball down the field because you're worried about the pressure. They keep him in the block, but that means what, Anthony? That means you only get 3 into a route. And while this is a touchdown, you can see that McKenzie's taken away. Diggs has basically 3 guys watching him. Luckily, Gabe Davis is able to sneak here to the back of the end zone because this corner doesn't slouch off and get depth anymore and make that throw that much more difficult. And so Josh Allen is able to make this one hell of a throw to Gabriel Davis for the touchdown. But again, that's relying on your quarterback to be a star and a superstar in many ways. And so when analysts talk about, Josh Allen is carrying this team, and many times he does, but they need better scheming. Like, again, this is open, but it's because of bad defense. I wouldn't say necessarily because of what was schemed here, but we've seen Josh Allen have to rely on his arm and his talent a little too much, especially, again, from that week 10 on the back half of last year.
It's awesome that Josh Allen can make alien plays or unicorn throws and plays with his legs and all these things, but it's too much to ask him to do that consistently. And, again, you and I have had that joke that you mentioned, like we said it the last couple of years. If you like, what's the Bills playbook? If you open up, it's just a picture of Josh Allen. But it seemed like those dials were turned up even more this year in terms of relying on Josh Allen. And this is beautiful. Like you get that corner route from Davis. He sells the post. He catches the safety flat-footed, bends it out to the outside. McKenzie is occupying the Bears middle linebacker with the Bears here in Tampa 2. And you make a whole shot, 25 yards downfield to the corner of the end zone in a pinpoint throw. Like, this is gorgeous. It's a good route from Davis. It's a great throw by Josh Allen. But it speaks to the design. Like the Bears screwed this up. Like, you've got 7 into coverage on 3. Like, you should have this, and especially too with that corner. Exactly. There is, so the Bears are in Tampa.
There's no one threatening him.
Exactly. So for those who don't know, the Bears are in Tampa 2, which means your 2 outside corners have the flats. So that first corner that's underneath Gabe Davis at the top of the screen, there's no one underneath him. There's no out route. There's no route to the flats. So all he has to do is keep sinking. Just like Kyrie Elam did in the wild card game against Miami when he got his interception on that 3rd down. Nobody held him in the flat, so he just kept sinking. The corner there for Chicago does what you're not supposed to do, and he's just covering grass. There is nothing holding you underneath, so keep sinking, get underneath this route. So at the end of the day, it's a touchdown. It's a good route from Davis. It's a great throw from Josh Allen, but it is very much because the Bears screwed this up, and the Bills took advantage of it, but
Right.
from an outset standpoint, it shouldn't have succeeded.
Right. And so here's another touchdown to Davis with Diggs in the slot, using him as a decoy to get the eyes on him. It's a 1st and 10 situation. But I want you to watch again this throw. And this was the reason I brought this one up is because Aaron Rodgers said that, this is one of those like normal plays for Josh Allen, but he hits he's flat footed and he's able to make this throw left hash. Look where he's at on the left hash. So he's throwing it to the tight side of the boundary there. And then it's right on Gabriel Davis's hands. Like, that is an unreal throw for Josh Allen and anyone in the league. But you see all the eyes right there were on Diggs, and he's able to Davis is able to get on the toes of that safety. And then again, you're relying on Josh Allen to make one of the better throws this season. You see it from the end zone angle, and I want to highlight the placement like we did a few weeks ago after this game. It's right on the hands of Gabriel Davis. Like, he can just worry about catching it and getting his feet down. That's like what his main focus is, which again, for this year, he needed it. So it was a pinpoint pass from Josh Allen. But again, you're just relying on him to make these plays consistently. And so I understand when people say you got to get him some more weapons, not just up front, but down the field, separators that can help him make things easier for him. Those easy buttons, not to have to make these plays all the time.
Yeah, more guys to especially win in one-on-one scenarios, whether it's in zone or especially in man, guys who can separate and win in a multitude of ways. I think that also helps Dorsey because he gets more tools to play with. I know everybody's probably going to jump in and be like, it doesn't matter, he's going to suck anyway. But, adding more weapons and tools definitely helps. I like this play coming after the one we just showed because it's a nice juxtaposition of what happens to the corner at the bottom of the screen here. So you've got Xavier Howard at the bottom. Davis runs that little, it's almost like a smash concept like we talked about when we broke it down. So Diggs holds the corner at the bottom of the screen, which allows Gabe Davis to get into that hole shot. So this one has a little more, design and concept to it, even though it is just a smash concept, but you get that influence of that underneath corner from, Stephon Diggs' route, not to mention it's Stephon Diggs and he has gravity. And then it works out with Josh. I think we talked about it with this Josh Allen throwing Gabe Davis open because he throws it to a spot where it's perfect placement and Gabe Davis is, because this really isn't bad coverage from where the safety is right now, but Allen just throws it to a pinpoint spot. It's a dart.
But the other side of this is it's 1st and 10 and Diggs is open.
Fair point. So he doesn't need to make
He didn't need to make this, but again, it's a good decision. I'm not hating him for that, but it's one of those, the other side of the argument is like, yes, he was big game hunting, but he did have Diggs open there for several yards, but he did take the shot down the field.
And if he doesn't complete it, and this was the one that put them up even further in this game. So they needed a touchdown here.
Yeah.
But if they
up 3 points there,
say, right. Yep. So if they don't get it, momentum isn't on their side really at this point. If they don't get that touchdown, now all of a sudden it's 2nd and 10 and you missed another wide open guy. Again, that's the risk reward, the yin and the yang of Josh Allen and where he goes. When it works, it's awesome and we praise it. And when it doesn't, it's a disaster.
All right. So this is the final play of this breakdown. And so you can see how the coverage beaters, those routes that we just showed you, they're kind of independent. There's not much gimmick to it. There's not much eye candy. It's just, hey, this is the coverage they're going to be in. We're going to attack the coverage. The ball's going to go where it's going to go. This play against Detroit, this was kind of the opposite. It's a 3rd and 6 situation. You're in the red zone right there. And there are layers to this, whether it's man or zone. There are layers to this, whether he wants to go short or go deep. And so let's look at this play to kind of show you how like the Super Bowl teams with Andy Reid and Steichen there, the new head coach of the Colts, right? He was just announced as the head.
Yeah,
head
they
coach
lost both coordinators, Shane Steichen to the Colts, and then Jonathan Gannon is now the head coach in Arizona.
You saw that sequencing and building layers onto a play. So here's a 3rd and 6 play. The Bills go into a 2-by-2 set with Diggs motioning across the formation. And so watch the man beater concept on that side. So you saw some of the motion come across. You see the man coverage. Watch how they pay attention to Diggs. All right. So Diggs slow plays and slow releases there. You got a quick route across the middle from Dawson Knox with man coverage, and then you see that safety jump Diggs. So he's bracketed, he's taken away. So read number one, Diggs taken away. Dawson Knox, good coverage. That's okay. It's man coverage. Here comes the deep over from McKenzie. Third read, that layer. If this was cover three, this would still be open, and McKenzie would probably be getting the ball here because they would still be paying attention to Diggs. So when I say this has layers, whether it's man or zone, it does. So we've seen McKenzie score on this play. Maybe it was it against the Seahawks a few years ago?
Oh, yeah.
He ran that deep over. Diggs ran the curl route. Or maybe it was Brown. One of those two. They ran that deep over versus cover three. It was a touchdown. So there's really nice layers to this play, whether it's man or zone. And you know what? Even if McKenzie isn't open, here comes an inbreaker from Gabriel Davis. This is the type of creativity and layers and sequencing that you want to see from an offensive coordinator.
This one was beautiful. This is what Isaiah McKenzie was made for, to attack single high coverages or man coverages, specifically with these deep overs. His ability to separate and run away from a multitude of slot defenders. We always make the joke that Miles Bryant from the Patriots is still seeing these type of routes in his like nightmares, because this is all that happened to the Patriots in that game in New England 2 seasons ago. But exactly to your point, like this play has layers. You also get pass protection up front that allows Josh Allen to get from 1 to 2 to 3. And then you've got the route progression that works against a multitude of coverages. This play gives Josh Allen multiple answers that he's easily able to get to, as long as he has protection, that he's easily able to get to, like you mentioned, against a multitude of coverages. Like, it's got answers baked in. This is exactly to your point, what there needs to be more of, because you've said it so many times, and we've talked about it offline and online. So much of the Bills' passing game this year, because it was so progression based, and because it was, disjointed in certain concepts that beat this coverage on this side and the opposite on the other side.
Yeah.
If Josh isn't correct in his pre-snap assessment, or someone doesn't win, one of those sides is screwed. And if you try to come back to the other side, that's going to be hard. You might not have time to get to that side because of the protection, or just because of what's happened on the backside.
And you saw it, right? We saw it on some of those sacks, right? And simple concepts, working right to left, just running the offense, running those progressions, working through it. And you saw that by the time he got to his third read, he was taken down. So yeah, you're right, man. Like on this play, it's just the opposite. He's able to smoothly. You're not just going full field read. Everything is condensed. Your field vision is tighter because you're working left to right, but your eyes and feet are naturally bringing you to your next primary read, right? It's just beautiful.
It's natural. Everybody coming into that field of vision, his progressions are natural. The routes all flow. It's a full field concept and idea and play call, and it works out in the end. And also tying into it is, Josh gets some protection. He gets a hand right near his elbow in his, throwing lane as he makes the throw, but there's so much space for McKenzie. I think this is also the one where after he scores, Diggs turns around and just points to Allen. Yeah. And Diggs points to him like, yo, bro, yeah, that's you, man. Like, that's a good throw. But Stephon Diggs obviously hates it here and wants to leave.
Yes.
He did some interviews. He wants out.
Yeah. He just put out a cryptic tweet from what we heard. That was the breaking news before we went live, right?
True. That's true. Yeah, he put out like an emoji that means something, or maybe doesn't mean anything at all, as AJ in our chat laughs. So yeah, there's no one way to win if you are a football team. You can win doing hard stuff a bunch of time. You can win with easy buttons. You can win with sequencing or talent. You can win with scheme. It happens in a variety of ways. There's no one way to build a team, or no one way to win a game, just like there's no real one way to lose it. The Bills showed a lot of positive pieces on the offensive side of the ball this year. Again, I know I saw a lot of comments coming through. Especially Erik has been on Dorsey a majority of this year. Like when he's been bad, Erik has been all over him. And I think I've been softer, but if you go and follow my Twitter from like November-ish through, It's not great for Ken Dorsey, but there are some positives to build upon
Yeah.
for this offense. And even with all the things that we're nitpicking, right? And talking
Hmm.
about this didn't work and that didn't work, and the offensive line was bad, and Allen's decision making and sequencing and concepts and scheming and the weapons and the drops and the pressure. They were second in offense and DVOA. They were at the top of almost every success and EPA metric that you want to look at holistically, or passing and even running, which comes as a shock for this offense. And that does match up in some ways to the film. And so I know people, when they hear the success and the metrics, they just want to throw it out, but you can't. Like, this offense was successful on the whole. They were a good team. You don't get to 13 wins accidentally. You don't get at the top of all those metrics accidentally and put up the numbers that they did. But there are areas to clean up, both in execution and from a roster perspective,
Hmm.
also from a Ken Dorsey perspective, in a multitude of areas. But there is reason to have some hope. It's just a matter of, what can they build upon going forward, and can they remove some of those problematic areas and really, Erik, lean into what they had success with, and not only lean into it, but build upon it further and add those layers and those levels in order to reduce predictability and be as versatile and multiple as possible.
Right, and I'm glad you said that, because yes, I've been very critical of him, and I still still question whether he can make some of these calls that fooled the good defensive coordinators, because we didn't see it all that much. Too much of it was a lot of relying on Josh Allen, especially late in the year and into the playoffs,
And we
as we've
should
shown.
question that, because we don't have
Sure,
anything else to compare it to. It's not like we can be like, well, when he was with
year
this
one,
team, he
yeah,
eventually worked it out. No, like,
right.
it's fair you should question it.
Yeah, and so I think the jury's still out on that. But even with all that said, they did some really good things, as Anthony said, and I'm one to admit that. Brad says we nitpick, and yet they were still just as effective somehow as 21. They were actually better in almost
Yeah, they
all
improved.
metrics,
Their
advanced
offense
metrics.
their offense in 2021, just from a DVOA perspective, finished 10th in 2021. They
Hmm.
finished second this year. But exactly to his point, the phrase, it felt like pulling teeth, and that's the
Right.
problem.
Yeah, and so even with all that said, I do think that Dorsey and his staff can go back to the drawing board and get some things on paper, get some new personnel in there, some new wrinkles. It'll eventually come down to the big games, though, and we'll
Mhm.
wait for that. But I do think that he can improve. It's pretty obvious he can improve. I mean, and that's scary. And that's scary
Right?
with how well they played this year. It just, for Josh Allen, get him some weapons, get him some blocking, get another guy in there to help up front, and some separators. I do think they need to go back to that fastball mentality. Yes, Josh Allen is the focal point of this offense, but they also need to have guys that can separate quickly, that can get open quickly. If not for, Josh Allen, for Ken Dorsey, make his
Mhm.
job easier, right? They, a lot of the last year, especially going with some of the receivers that they did, who were still kind of unproven in many ways as go-to guys in Gabriel Davis, Isaiah McKenzie. I think, in a lot of ways, they weren't the type of separators that Josh Allen was used to in
Mm.
those years where they were very effective. So find those separators, in the draft, in free agency, help Josh Allen out, help Ken Dorsey out if it comes down to that. Make his job easier just as much as Josh Allen's. And so, with that said, we did the defense last week, offense this week. I hope you guys, learned a lot from that. And that one was kind of fun because when it comes to offense, you can see the sequencing. Defense is
Mhm.
more reactive, right?
Mhm.
You can see how they're reacting to what the offense is throwing at them. But with the offensive stuff, you could see how defenses were reacting to Dorsey and started to slow down what was an efficient offense the first half of the year. But then, as you saw them go up against some of the better defenses and some of the talented players, they took away some of that efficiency and forced Josh Allen to be more variant, throwing the ball down the field more, which led to some, not just turnovers, but just led to that higher variance in play from the first to second half.
Variance is such a good way to put it, because you still saw holistic success, but it was very up and down. It was three and outs and bashing your head against the wall, and then it was just tearing a defense apart in the blink of an eye, efficiently or with explosives. And I think you echoed a lot of similar sentiments that I'm feeling for this offseason. I think there are reasons to be encouraged. I think there are reasons to be concerned. You are, can Ken Dorsey build upon this and be successful? Is was this year a learning experience, and what did he learn and what did he pull from this? And same thing for the players, like, and how do they build upon it going forward? And then what do they do from a roster perspective? Because I think that's a piece that gets maybe not necessarily lost, but has taken such a big back seat in this conversation because so many people have just focused on Dorsey or Davis or now the offensive line. Can this team address the weakness that the offensive line was? Can they address the lack of diversity in skill set for this weaponry group and really add more pieces to allow them to be more versatile, more multiple, and to be able to attack defenses in multiple ways? And again, I keep making the comment. I know people will say, like, well, even if they get more weapons, Dorsey won't know how to use them anyway. We really don't know that. And the only way to find out is to add more to the shelves and see what Dorsey can do, what Allen can do. It starts with protection up front. I think is the huge source point for so much of what happened with this offense. Better offensive line play for Josh Allen protects Josh, helps the passing game, also in theory helps the run game. Oh, thank you very much for the kind words. We're getting a lot of awesome kind words. We appreciate you, folks. Thank you so much. So offensive line play, I think, is where it starts. And then you get those weapons on the periphery. We throw it into a bag. We shake it up. And then we see what happens for this Bills team in 2023. And yeah, with these last two episodes, this week and last week, Eric, like you said, we wanted to set the tone for the offseason. In order to do that, we really had to break down what these teams were on each side of the ball. So that way we can use this as like the barometer and baseline in terms of talking about who to look for in free agency or who to look for in the draft and the whys behind it, really connecting it as, yeah, we are full board into the offseason now. Before we know it, the combine will be happening, and then free agency starts a couple weeks after that. We're going to close our eyes, and it's going to be like April 27th or 28th, and the NFL draft will be happening.
Yeah.
Time flies, and we hope you folks will be here with us in the Cover One Film Room every single week as we ride you through this offseason with the schematic pieces and the X's and O's breakdowns for anything and everything Buffalo Bills. If you enjoyed this episode here on YouTube, please, 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 and thank you while you are here right now live, or if you're watching later, please drop a like on this video. We're still riding hot with over 100 people live. It'd be awesome if we finished this episode and saw over 100 likes on this video. It goes a long way towards helping us to track and trend in front of more eyes and ears. If you did not watch this episode live, that's cool. Thank you for your post live view. If you're listening on one of the podcasting apps or platforms, thank you very much for your listen, your download, whatever have you. If you are on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you consume your podcasts, please subscribe there as well. Drop a rating and a review. Subscribe here to the Cover One Film Room here on YouTube. Tell your family and friends and loved ones about how awesome this brand is and how awesome this show is. Or if you hated this show, tell your enemies and try and ruin their day with this show. We appreciate you folks more than you would know. Eric, any kind words or anything as we ride out here?
Just some house cleaning. We're going to figure out next week. I will not be available for the show, so we're going to try to get Kendall here if he's able to with his move and everything. But if not, we may have to cancel next week. I'll be on the road traveling, so we'll let you guys know. We'll keep you up to date on that. But if not, either way, it's off season. Combines in a couple weeks, as Ant said. We're going to be doing a lot of deep dives into free agency. Yep. And then obviously some draft stuff in the background as well. So we're going to start ramping up free agency draft talk. So make sure you're following everyone at Cover One, not just on the YouTube channel, but on social media, because all of us have our own little brands and ways of doing things in the off season. So you'll get a little bit of everything from everyone. So thanks to everyone for tuning in. Again, we couldn't do this without you.
Yeah, absolutely not. And thank you to everybody who rode with us live in this episode. It's always cool to see all the live viewers and the back and forth with each other and the back and forth with us. So we appreciate you folks for tuning in live. If you didn't, that's cool too. Thank you for every single ounce of support you folks show us in whichever way it comes. And yeah, it's called the off season, but it's still extremely busy and we are still extremely on. I feel like I'm busier than I even was during the regular season with all the prospect tape and free agency evaluations in addition to regular Bills content. So things are just beginning for this very important offseason for the Buffalo Bills, and bang it here on the Cover One Film Room every week for anything and everything that you need. And the Cover One channel as a whole, we got you covered every single day of the week with Bills content that you need in whatever form or fashion. Go check out Cover One Pass. Eric, you want to give a quick little word on what that is and why it's so awesome?
Yeah, we heard, Mike was in the chat saying he'll see us in the Slack channel. So that's one of the perks of the One Pass. If you become an insider, you get some of our premium content on the website, but also access to all of our creators and our community. It's an awesome, tight-knit community. of guys that are in there talking ball and girls talking ball all day. We have different channels for analytics, mock drafts. That's a big one.
Mhm.
Fantasy channels where you could do fantasy football and all those sorts of things. I mean, they have several fantasy football leagues.
Yeah.
So it's a good community. I think the Slack channel, the premium Slack channel, is one of the biggest perks. So get to cover1.football, sign up for that one pass, and you'll get the link once you sign up to join the Cover One Slack channel.
I love that Michael's always plug in the Slack channel. And I also think it's funny too, because he doesn't have Twitter. So I only talk to him through Slack and like in the DMs and the messages. So it's just like, it's just it's an awesome piece for the interactivity and what you've been able to build and how that's furthered and, you know, meeting
awesome.
people. It's awesome to like go to Bill's training camp or Bill's games. And then someone comes up to you and was like, Anthony, and I'm like, yeah, it's like, oh, I'm so-and-so from the Slack channel. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like,
and you sit there and watch football with them the whole day. It's awesome.
You just talk ball. It's a really great piece that the brand is built and kind of connects things and push things forward. So check that out. There's also the link in the episode show notes and description here with more info and details and anything and everything you need. Drop a like on this video, all that good stuff. We appreciate you folks. We may or may not see you next week. Check out the Twitter handles at Cover One, or for Eric's personal at Erik J. Turner, and then myself at pro__ANT. We'll have you covered with all the information as we continue to matriculate forward in this Buffalo Bills off season. For myself, Anthony Prohaska, for Erik Turner, for AJ behind the scenes helping us out. This has been another episode of the Cover One Film Room. We hope you and your family and friends and loved ones, don't make me join Twitter, that's funny. We hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well. Stay safe, be kind to one another, take care of one another, and as always, go Bills.